So what else does the president need to say to get Congress and the American people on board? Here now is David Drucker, staff writer for Roll Call, to say that it's in our national interest. Is that a bit of a stretch? What does he mean by that, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's a stretch. I just think the president has to forcefully and clearly make the case. I think the problem he has had is that he did not, first of all, address the nation on television the moment we went into Libya on that Saturday. And that's something that the American people have come to expect from Democrat and Republican alike.
He's doing this under pressure now.
Well, I don't know if he's doing it under pressure or just he decided he finally got around to it and now in his mind is the time. I think, Greg, one of the problems the president has had is that he has said on the one hand, we're there for humanitarian reasons only. We're going to hand this thing off any second. On the other hand, it's American policy that Gaddafi should no longer be in charge of Libya. And maybe that makes sense to the president, but I think it sends mixed signals to the American people and to Congress. They don't understand how, if it's our policy that he should go, we're not going to do something about it, given that we're firing guns there.
Yeah. Well, let me come back to my original question, David. I want to try to pin you down a little bit more. If the president says, look, we're there to protect all of those innocent civilians from being slaughtered, how is that, and a great many people have been emailing us, how is that in our national interest?
Well, I think that the policy of the United States, going back to World War II, has been to selectively stand up for other countries who are under assault, either by their own rulers or by other countries. We went into Korea to protect from an attack from North Korea into South Korea. We went into Kuwait to kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And so this is something we have done because Americans have generally believed that standing up for democracies around the world, or at least preventing rogue regimes from running rampant around the globe, has been good for American foreign policy, good for American economic policy, good for our allies.
Do you think
so the case is there to make.
Do you think he's going to need to explain, though, why Libya, when you've got Yemen, Bahrain, now Syria, experiencing the same sort of thing, and my goodness, thousands of people have been massacred, slaughtered in the Congo. Why have we never intervened in the Congo? That's been going on for years now. So why Libya? Congo's in the same continent. But Congo, Greg, of course, doesn't have oil.
Greg, you're making a point. He does have to explain why Libya. And this is something that American presidents have always had to explain. George W. Bush had to explain why Iraq and not Iran or Syria after 9/11. And I think President Obama does. I don't think oil has much to do with this particular action, simply because we don't need their oil. And the Arab League, which is supportive, we think, of this action, there are other countries where we get our oil from. But you're right. He does have to explain why Libya. And I think there's a case to make. There's a case to make against it as well. But the case is there if he makes it. I think what he needs to avoid doing is trying to have it both ways. We're there, but not exactly because somebody else is in charge. We're only there for humanitarian reasons, but hey, we want Gaddafi to go. I think he just needs to pick a lane and stick with it. And he needs to keep Congress looped in and the American people regularly looped in. And I think that will help him here, because I think on both sides of the political aisle and among a significant amount of the American people is support in concept for what he's trying to do in Libya.
You know, look, there are a great many analysts who have said, including on our air, that unless you take out Muammar Gaddafi, the United States could be in for a very long and expensive war of attrition. Do you think he's going to explain why, even though it is his policy that Gaddafi must go, he's not targeting Gaddafi?
I don't think he will, and it's something he hasn't explained thus far. Now, I could be wrong, but I think that in wanting to sort of kind of walk a nuanced fence here on what we hope happens versus what we plan to do about it, I don't think he's going to say, in a sense, it's okay with us if Gaddafi stays in power. Because
he said that
essentially,
on Tuesday.
if you clear away the language, that's essentially what he would be saying. So I don't think he will say that. I think that he probably hopes that the action we're taking will help the rebels in Libya get rid of Gaddafi themselves, and that hopefully that will solve the problem.
It's interesting because on Tuesday in an interview he actually suggested that, if Gaddafi conforms his conduct or changes his conduct, he could stay in power. I think that really caught a lot of people by surprise. There's an interesting story, David, in the Los Angeles Times today, and It recalls for the readers a dovish Democrat who espoused his principles at a 2002 anti-war rally, Barack Obama, and it quotes him. What I am opposed to is a dumb war. What I'm opposed to is a rash war, a war based not on reason, but on passion. So Monday night, does he need to explain to the American people that this is none of those things?
Well, I think he simply needs to explain why we're there, what the objective is, and what the end game is. And I think most Americans understand his history. They know he was an Iraq war critic. They know in general he doesn't like to use this kind of military action. If you look at how he's handled Iraq and Afghanistan, on the one hand, he sent more troops in and he appears to support the issue. On the other hand, he announces an end date certain. And so this is sort of par for the course for how he looks at this. He is, in my view, a reluctant wartime leader, much more comfortable focusing on domestic issues, and he's got his left flank to worry about in the Democratic Party, and that's an issue for him. I think, knowing all of that, the best thing he could do tomorrow and this week is be clear, be repetitive, and not try and walk a fence. Pick a lane, and I think that for the most part he'll get more support from the American people, because this, again, is not something that we tend to be opposed to as a general rule. I think that it has felt muddled to Americans, and when things are muddled from a foreign policy and a military standpoint, they tend to say no. But if they understand it, at least in the beginning, they tend to...
David Drucker, staff writer for Roll Call. David, good to see you.
Great to see you, Greg. Thank you.
Well, let's go.